Stories making the headlines. It's the ITV News at 10.
Russia says its rockets have taken aim at Kyiv once again. The claimed strikes, not confirmed by Ukraine, follow the sinking of Russia's flagship in the Black Sea.
Russian ships can go to the bottom only.
Also, violent clashes at Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque. At least 150 people are injured. Harry and Meghan arrive in the Netherlands for the Invictus Games after calling in on the Queen and...
What a player! What a player!
The end of Joe Root's innings as England's Test cricket captain.
This is ITV News with Lucrezia Millarini.
Good evening. The expected focus of Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine may be shifting east, but people in the capital, Kyiv, are once again living under the threat of attack. There were air raid sirens again today, and Russia claimed to have hit a missile factory on the outskirts of the city. Moscow said it was revenge for an assault on its territory. But the demise of Russia's flagship vessel, Moskva, which officials in both Kyiv and Washington say was sunk by Ukrainian missiles, may also have provided a motive. Our correspondent Peter Smith reports from Kyiv.
In Ukraine's capital, the quiet of the curfew was disrupted early this morning. The sirens sounded to warn of more incoming fire. The Kremlin claims to have hit Kyiv overnight, retaliation for attacks on Russian soil.
Tonight, sea-based, high-precision, long-range Kalibr missiles hit a military facility in the outskirts of Kyiv. As a result of the attack on the Juliani machine-building plant Vizar, the workshops for the production and repair of long-range and medium-range anti-aircraft missile systems, as well as anti-ship missiles, were destroyed.
The Kyiv strikes are unconfirmed by Ukraine, but this is an escalation after the flagship of Putin's Black Sea fleet suffered damage. Russia has since confirmed the Moskva missile cruiser has now sunk after bombarding Ukrainian targets with impunity until now. The Kremlin is still claiming this was an accident, that it was their own ammunition that exploded and Moskva then sunk in a storm. But here in Kyiv, President Zelensky has claimed responsibility and thanked the people he called the true defenders of Ukraine.
Those who drove the enemy out of the north, those who have shown that Russian aviation is defenseless, even though Russia has spent tens of billions of dollars on various systems to protect its aircraft, those who have shown that Russian ships can go to the bottom only.
While Ukraine celebrates its first success in the Black Sea, the people here are still braced for more misery. Cities like Kharkiv in the east remain under constant bombardment, and Putin is already preparing the second phase of Russia's invasion. Peter Smith, ITV News, Kyiv.
Authorities in Jerusalem will be hoping to prevent further violence this weekend after more than 150 people were injured in clashes at the Al-Aqsa Mosque today. There were chaotic scenes as Israeli police used tear gas and stun grenades to disperse Palestinians who threw rocks and fireworks. Martha Fairley has the details.
From the early hours, Palestinians gathered at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in Jerusalem. At the site sacred to both Muslims and Jews, they began throwing fireworks and stones. After 3 weeks of growing violence, they'd been urged to protect their mosque by the Palestinian Foreign Ministry. As Israeli police moved in, they came under a hail of rocks and rubble. More than 150 people were injured, some carried away on stretchers while the violence continued. Rioters used screens and folded chairs as makeshift shields as the police fired tear gas and stun grenades. In a week where Ramadan, Passover and Easter all coincide, tensions have been running high.
You would imagine that it might bring people together and look for a way to pray maybe together as they believe in the same God. But as it happens, when religious extremism and nationalism enter into this equation, it brings exactly the opposite.
Police say they've made hundreds of arrests, and Israel's Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has ordered crossings into the West Bank and Gaza to be closed from this afternoon for at least the first 2 nights of the Jewish festival Passover. Meeting with the police chief and national security minister, he said they were working to calm things on Temple Mount and throughout Israel. By midday, the site had been cleared and reopened, with 60,000 people attending the main Friday prayers. But Israeli authorities remain prepared. Similar clashes during Ramadan last year led to an 11-day war with Gaza's rulers Hamas. Martha Fairley, ITV News.
Well, here it was pretty obvious yesterday's announcement that the UK will send some asylum seekers to Rwanda would prove controversial. Well, apparently that controversy extended to inside the Home Office. It's been confirmed that Home Secretary Priti Patel had to issue a ministerial direction to get the policy through. Our political correspondent Harry Horton is here to explain exactly what that means.
Well, it means that the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has issued a formal instruction to the Home Office to proceed with this policy, despite objections raised by the department's most senior civil servant, the Permanent Secretary. Now, these ministerial directions are quite rare. There's only been 2 issued in the Home Office in the past 30 years. ITV News understands that the Permanent Secretary didn't think there was enough evidence to prove that the policy would be effective. Essentially, that sending asylum seekers on planes to Rwanda wouldn't necessarily deter people from making those dangerous crossings in small boats across the Channel. Now, we understand that the Permanent Secretary was satisfied for the policy to proceed, recognised there was potential taxpayer savings from deterring people, but said the evidence for this policy was uncertain.
All right, and the UN Refugee Agency has now looked at the Rwanda plan. So what is their assessment of it? Well,
their assessment is that they think this policy is in breach of international law. Now, the Prime Minister has already said that he does think this policy fully complies with international law. We've heard the Home Secretary say that she thinks that this policy will be challenged in the courts, but she thinks that the Home Office will succeed. Ministers were hoping that the first flights with asylum seekers to Rwanda would leave at the end of next month. But it's clear tonight there are questions over the effectiveness of this policy and also the legality of this policy. That means that that date could get pushed back by some time. And if you speak to critics of this policy, some of them think it will never happen at all.
All right, Harry, thank you. Well, fresh allegations have emerged about disgraced former Conservative MP Imran Ahmad Khan, convicted on Monday of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy. Today, The Guardian reported that a man alleges he was propositioned by Mr Khan when he was 16, and the Politico website quotes former members of his staff who claim he had a history of bullying. Dozens of climate activists were arrested during more protests at fuel depots today. Members of the Just Stop Oil group climbed on top of tankers and blockaded sites in Essex and Warwickshire. And Twitter has revealed its strategy to fight a hostile takeover by Tesla billionaire Elon Musk. The social media giant will use a so-called poison pill defence, which allows shareholders to buy extra shares at a discount, diluting Musk's holdings. After dropping in to see the Queen at Windsor yesterday, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex touched down in the Netherlands today. They're there for the opening of the Invictus Games, the event for injured veterans, which Prince Harry founded. Well, Lizzie Robinson is at The Hague, where they arrived early. And Lizzie, what's on the agenda for the couple this weekend?
Yes, Lucrezia, they are in the Netherlands for Prince Harry's Invictus Games, and they arrived at the main park behind me earlier for their first event, a reception held for friends and family of the competitors here at the Invictus Games. And this is their first time in Europe as a couple since they stepped back as working royals in 2020. But it was not their first stop in Europe. They paid a secret visit to see the Queen and the Prince of Wales at Windsor Castle yesterday. And it was the first time they'd all seen each other face to face since Harry and Meghan's Oprah interview, where they'd made a whole host of allegations. But yesterday being seen as something of an olive branch. The focus now for Harry and Meghan, though, is here in the Netherlands and on the Invictus Games. Prince Harry is founding patron of Invictus, and it's something that he is very personally invested in. Having served 2 tours of Afghanistan, he established the Games in 2014 as a way of helping to support sick and injured servicemen and women. And over the next couple of days, you can expect to see them tomorrow at the opening ceremony, where they will both give speeches, and we'll also see them at the competition in the days ahead.
All right, Lizzie in The Hague, thank you. Sport now, and the stats from Joe Root's spell as captain of the England Test side do not lie. A record 27 wins, and named Men's Cricketer of the Year in 2021. But he also failed to bring home the Ashes and has just won one match in 17. So now he's out, and as Chris Scudder reports, the search for the next man in begins.
He arrived as a fresh-faced hopeful 5 years ago and leaves with the most ever Test wins by an England captain. But he also lost the most, and his recent record of only 1 win in the last 17 is England's worst run since the 1980s. A thrashing in the Ashes, then a humiliating defeat in the West Indies. But Root then did not want to leave.
I'm very passionate about trying to take this team forward, and I will control all that I can.
But if seasoned cricket watchers were hedging their bets about whether he'd stay or go, it turns out the man whose shirt bore the legend Root 66 was not getting his kicks as captain after all, prompting an about turn. "I've loved leading my country," he said in a statement, "but recently it's hit home how much of a toll it's taken on me and the impact it's had on me away from the game."
And I think after a while you can see in that 3rd Test match that he was coming to the end of his reign, and he just felt like it's time to move on now.
Root will stay on as a batsman with nearly 10,000 runs already to his name, while the England and Wales Cricket Board hope he'll now ease his successor into one of English sport's highest profile roles.
And while there's no word yet on who that successor might be, the overwhelming favourite is the man whose own heroics on the field have already passed into legend, the current vice-captain, Ben Stokes. Chris Scudder, ITV News, Lords.
And finally, it's exactly 3 years since a fire which devastated Notre Dame in Paris, and the world-famous cathedral has just given up one of its secrets ahead of Easter. During restoration work, archaeologists uncovered what they've called a treasure trove buried beneath the church, dating back centuries. They found ancient tombs from the Middle Ages and carved artworks and sculptures, including a representation of Jesus. And that is all for tonight. Thank you very much for watching, and enjoy your Easter weekend. Bye-bye.